The desert had no horizon, only heat and haze. Beneath Rain-Kell's knees, the sand ground into his flesh like a judgment, its bite finding every exposed patch of skin beneath the torn edges of his technician's uniform. The collar clung to his neck with dried sweat, salt, and blood. Overhead, the twin suns bled into the sky, painting the air in amber and burnt rose, stretching shadows across the basin like fingers searching for lost souls. His wrists ached where the iron clasps had rubbed raw, and when he tried to shift his weight, the chains clinked softly, a sound that felt louder than it should have. He was on display here, in the pit of an alien tribunal, kneeling before three tall beings with copper-toned skin and glowing blue face markings. They stood unmoving atop a wide, half-buried stone disk, etched in lines and runes Rain didn't understand. He barely understood any of this. Rain had trained in xenolinguistics, basic patterns of the interstellar trade dialects, some ceremonial phrases, body language primers. But this wasn't that. The sounds these three made were liquid and lyrical, like rivers flowing over pebbles in deliberate cadence. The lead figure, the one with the double row of glowing dots above their eyes, raised a hand, pausing mid-sentence. And the crowd, the silent, watching audience of their kind, maybe 50 in number, leaned in. The moment grew long, heavier than gravity. Rain looked up, searching for mercy in their faces. He found nothing. Only ritual. Only the rhythm of judgment. Then the crowd shifted. Parted. She entered. One step at a time, she moved like the desert itself had been born to carry her weight. Not slow, not hurried, inevitable. She was taller than the others, not by much, but enough to notice. Her skin was a deeper shade of blue, almost violet in the bleeding light, and her armor was functional, bearing scuffs and dents that hadn't been polished out. Not for show. For memory. A long tail, wrapped in silver rings, swayed behind her, precise as a metronome. The crowd murmured at her presence, something between awe and dread. Rain's heart thumped louder, but not from fear. He knew her. Not personally, but in the way that stories become shadows. The humans on this moon whispered of her in half-jokes and warnings. A keeper of ancient rites. A nameless sentinel. A protector or punisher, depending on how the tale was told. She was real. She approached. And he, like an idiot, smirked. Nice tale, Rain said, voice cracked from thirst and exhaustion. You polish it yourself? The sound that followed wasn't laughter. It wasn't anything human. A gasp rippled through the assembly like wind moving through dry leaves. Several of the alien crowd recoiled, one shielding their face with a wide palm. Even the three judges exchanged glances, low tones buzzing like insects in stormlight. Her eyes narrowed, the indigo fire of them colder than space. Then it happened. From the base of her spine, the rings on her tail began to glow. Light bled outward, climbing along the curve of her tail in a wave of shimmering cerulean flame. It didn't burn the air. It sang through it. The fire didn't consume, it declared. Complete silence fell. She spoke. And somehow, impossibly, in his language. You called, she said, her voice a whisper of steel. Now I must. Rain's smirk dropped. Called, he echoed. Wait, what? But she turned, and with a gesture, the chains fell from his wrists. The crowd stepped back. No one touched him. No one explained. She began walking. He hesitated. Then followed. They left the basin, just the two of them, in the violet hush of dusk. No one stopped them. No one needed to. Rain wasn't a prisoner anymore. Apparently. He wasn't free, either. She didn't speak. For nearly an hour, the only sound was the faint crunch of their steps on dry, crystalline soil and the distant call of some three-voiced bird. The suns had almost set when Rain spoke again. So, Blue, do I call you that, or do you have a name? No answer. I'm Rain, by the way. Rain Kell. Technician 2nd class, Earthborn, Federation registered. Currently confused as hell. Still silence. You do realize I have no idea what's going on, right? She turned her head. Just slightly. I know. He blinked. Well, great. That makes one of us. The next few hours passed in a stilted rhythm, her in front, silent, alert, him behind, stumbling over stones, his breath thin from the altitude. His legs ached. His wrists throbbed. The adrenaline from earlier had long since drained out, leaving behind exhaustion and the gnawing edge of fear. When they stopped, it was at a shallow gorge lined with wind-carved rock. She selected a vantage point near a ledge, her eyes always scanning the horizon. Rain slumped down beside a low outcrop, his body sagging against it like a discarded coat. She activated a small energy core. Firelight bloomed, warm, orange, and alien. Look, Rain said, voice low now, I didn't mean anything by it. The joke. I was just, nervous. Silence. I didn't mean to offend your people. Or, invoke some ancient oath ritual that binds you to me forever or whatever the hell just happened. Still nothing. He laughed, short, bitter. God, I'm going to die on this rock, and it's going to be because I tried to flirt badly. Then, finally, she looked at him. Her eyes shimmered like oil under moonlight. The fire of her tail had dimmed but still glowed faintly, like embers beneath glass. In your world, she said slowly, it was a joke. In mine, it was an oath. Rain frowned. What kind of oath? She paused. A binding. You called. I answered. I cannot leave your side until the fire fades. And if it never fades? Then I die when you do. They moved again at first light. Her pace had softened, not quite slow, but accommodating. She allowed him to walk beside her now, occasionally glancing toward him as if weighing the weight of every breath he took. He learned her name by accident. When he stumbled over a jagged slope, she reached out without thinking. Ishitari, she said sharply, as though calling herself back to awareness. He caught it. That's your name, he said. Ishitari. She said nothing. It's beautiful, he added, softer. Like a poem or a storm. Her tail flared faintly. By the third day, they reached the ridge of a canyon scattered with fossilized roots. The air here tasted of static and metal, Rain could feel the shift in pressure. She stopped abruptly. What is it? He asked. Flame testers. Okay, he said. Definitely not liking the sound of that. They come to test the called. To see if the bond was true. And if it's not. They kill the human. Oh. She turned her blade in one fluid motion. Rain paled. Wait, me. They're going to kill me. If you are weak, yes. Well, what the hell kind of cultural nightmare did I land in? Her eyes met his, and for the first time, there was a flicker of emotion. Sadness? Guilt? You joked, she said. Now you must endure. Before he could reply, they came. 4 of them. 3 male-coated, 1 taller and androgynous, each with skin patterned in different markings, glowing faintly. Their movements were precise, ritualistic. The leader spoke in the flowing cadence of her people. Ishitari responded in kind, her stance shifting. Her blade drawn, tail fire reigniting. Rain stayed still, trying to be invisible. Then she moved. Fast. The dance was beautiful and brutal. Her form curved like water. Their attacks were coordinated, efficient, unrelenting. And she was only one. Rain watched helplessly. When one of the testers broke off and circled behind, moving toward him, he panicked. He grabbed a sharp rock. Threw. Missed. But it distracted them, just enough. Ishitari took the opening. Disarmed. Disabled. Blood sprayed, violet and bright. But now they were three. Still dangerous. And she was tiring. Another tester charged her, she parried, but her shoulder was cut. She spun, kicked, countered. Another slash. Her side. Deeper. Rain couldn't breathe. Then the final attacker changed targets. Him. Rain saw the blade before he registered movement. Time slowed. Pain. A bright red line across his chest. Shallow, but bleeding. He screamed. Ishitari roared. The flame on her tail exploded into color, white at the core, surrounded by radiant blue. She didn't fight now. She annihilated. They fell. And she knelt at his side. "You bleed for me," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I failed." "No," he said, barely conscious. "I just didn't want you to die." She looked at him, truly looked, like she hadn't since they met. "You called," she repeated. "And I must." He smiled faintly. "I think. I'm starting to understand what that means." Her hands shook as she wrapped the bandage. His blood stained her palms. And something else passed between them then. Not an oath. But something older. The derelict drifted in the void like a god's forgotten coffin. It spun slowly in orbit above the moon Velden 3, a vast hollow vessel shaped like a curled ribcage. No signals, no propulsion. Just a long-dead shape wrapped in time. Fail stood at the edge of the research outpost's main viewport, watching it. His breath fogged the glass slightly. Others would say the ship looked eerie or cursed. He didn't think so. He just thought it was lonely. Fail couldn't speak, not because he chose silence, but because his voice had been taken from him before he ever learned to use it. His larynx had been damaged during birth. For as long as he could remember, he'd lived in a world where words only happened on screens or inside his skull. But Fail had a gift. He understood language, not just human, not just spoken, but vibration, rhythm, tension, resonance. His world wasn't silent. It was symphonic. The linguistics division had assigned him to Velden 3 to analyze strange pulses emanating from the derelict. There had been no breach. No external tampering. The structure was still intact. Yet it emitted patterns, once every few hours, low-frequency bursts that made the bones in his hands tingle. His colleagues logged them as static. Fail disagreed. The pulses weren't random. They had pattern. Emotion. Grief. He didn't know how he knew that. He just did. The outpost was cold, practical, colorless. Its corridors were thin, its oxygen thin, its people thinner. Fail didn't mind. He wasn't here for comfort. He was here for the hum. Every day, he isolated one of the new transmissions. Listened to it, felt it, through a skin-conducted translation pad. He watched waveforms. Notated patterns. Traced what he called emotional compression, tiny modulations in the signal that mirrored human affective states. He didn't share this with his team. They wouldn't understand. They were still looking for data. Fail was looking for voice. On the 8th day, everything changed. He boarded the derelict. They called it the Asa. From orbit, it looked like a fossil. Up close, it was cathedral-like, tall and narrow, built from smooth, bone-colored alloys unknown to human metallurgy. Fail stepped into its inner corridor, EVA suit whispering with each movement. Immediately, he felt pressure, like a heartbeat in the walls. He reached for the transmitter box and tapped out 3 slow pulses. Tap. Pause. Tap tap. Nothing. Then, reply. Tap. Tap tap tap. Tap. His chest tightened. Not an echo. Not a malfunction. A response. He moved deeper into the vessel, leaving the light of the human shuttle behind. The air inside was breathable, though stale. The walls seemed to pulse gently, their color shifting between ivory and gray with each of his steps. Then he found her. Or rather, she found him. "You're not one of them," the voice echoed around him, not in his ears, but in the pads of his fingers, through the metal of his suit. He turned, hands trembling. A figure stepped forward. Tall. Luminous skin like opal glass. Not clothed, exactly, but wrapped in layers of metallic film that shimmered as she moved. Her eyes, if they were eyes, were slits of pale green light. He couldn't speak. He didn't even try. She stepped closer. "Your bones speak," she said. "You hear through them. You feel without words." He raised his hands and signed slowly. "Who are you?" She tilted her head. "I am called Leal." Leal didn't speak in sounds. Not really. Her voice traveled through contact, resonating against metal, against skin, against the silence between them. She touched the wall. It vibrated faintly. He placed his hand against it, and for the first time, he understood her. Not her language. Her. Her sorrow. Her history. Her solitude. The Asa was not a warship. It was a memory ship, a vessel carrying the collective experiences of a species long extinct. Only one remained. Her. And she had been waiting for someone who could hear without needing to listen. Someone like Fail. They met every day after that. He'd leave the outpost under the guise of acoustic mapping missions. No one followed him. Fail wasn't good at friendships. He didn't crave them. But with Leal, something cracked inside him. She showed him how to use resonance pads embedded in the Asa's walls, translators of emotional frequency. He taught her human signs and facial expressions. They invented their own hybrid gestures. She told him her people didn't use words until they had to. "Language was a last resort," she said once. "Before that, we shared feeling." He wrote that down. Not in the report. In his private journal. Beneath the line, he wrote, "I think I love her." One night, if night could be measured in a sunless orbit, Fail rested his forehead against hers. The contact was gentle. Her skin was cool. They didn't need to say anything. Her pulse moved through his bones. He felt it like music. A rhythm older than speech. He stopped sending data back to headquarters. The transmissions from the Asa became classified, or so he claimed. His team didn't protest. No one wanted to go near the ghost ship anyway. But Fail didn't see a ghost. He saw a woman with memories etched into her flesh and sorrow woven into every vibration of her breath. And he wanted to give her something in return. "Stay," she said one evening, when his hand lingered longer than usual on hers. He paused. Then signed, "I want to." Her light dimmed. Not in sadness. In humility. "You don't have to fill silence with anything," she said. "Just be." He nodded. And stayed. A week passed. The outpost pinged his tracker, but he disabled it. His comms, too. He stopped being Fail the linguist. He became Fail, the one who listened. They built a chamber together at the core of the Asa. Not with tools, but with vibration. With tone. The Asa responded to emotional intention. If you harmonized the right frequency, the walls would reshape themselves. She called it the dreaming room. He called it home. There was no kiss. No sex. No traditional gestures of affection. Instead, he lay beside her, bare skin against hers, and they vibrated together in a slow, mutual rhythm. He could feel her remembering everything. Her people. Their loss. The aching gap of centuries. And she felt his silence. Not as absence. But as sanctuary. The Asa dimmed slowly over the weeks, its pulses now sinking with the two of them. They were one signal. Not a couple. Not lovers. Something older. More essential. He stopped writing. Stopped recording. He no longer needed words. He only needed her. But the outpost noticed. When his EVA suit remained unreturned. When his report logs stopped syncing. When static began interrupting nearby transmissions. They sent a drone. It never returned. On the final day, she turned to him and said, "They will come." He nodded. "We'll hide. They will burn. Then we'll flee." She paused. Her light flickered. "There's another way." He felt it through the wall. A frequency rising. A hum building. Something ancient and final. "I can become memory," she said. "And you with me. Not dead. Not gone. Just, echoed." He didn't hesitate. He placed his hand on hers. Yes. They lay together in the dreaming room as the Asa began to vibrate, deeper, lower, fuller. Light flooded the corridors. Memory expanded. Consciousness unbound. They became waveform. Emotion. Sound. Language beyond symbols. Love beyond flesh. When the boarding crew arrived days later, they found nothing. No fail. No alien. No vibration. Just silence. A perfect silence. And on one wall, etched in the strange half-metal like the trail of wind through sand, was a single phrase in an unknown pattern of curves and dots. No one could translate it. But Fail would have told them what it meant. "I listened, and she heard me." The silence in the grand archive of Eridani 6 was not emptiness. It was alive. It shifted. Echoed. Listened. Angkor Wat had spent 3 years inside its vast halls, surrounded by monoliths carved in dead languages, shelves that reached past gravity's sense of reason, and soundless, translucent stairways that looped between dimensions. The archive was a mystery, one built by ancient hands that were no longer flesh, and maintained by sentient mechanisms that did not sleep. Angkor wasn't there as a tourist. He was there because language was all he had left. And because he was hiding, from Earth, from his old life, from the memory of the man he'd loved and lost to a war no one remembered starting. Angkor was an exile in every way that mattered. He lived in Section Theta 9, a neglected wing where entire dialects of forgotten species crumbled in digital vaults. He worked alone. Spoke to no one. And no one came to him, until one morning, when the vault door opened without warning and someone stepped through. Not a drone. Not a mech. Someone with a body like starlight trapped in shifting glass. A form that never quite settled, tall, then not, broad-shouldered, then slender, skin like dust given shape. They moved with quiet confidence, eyes catching the filtered sunlight that dripped through the prismatic ceiling. "I thought this wing was sealed," Angkor said, standing slowly. "It was," they replied. "I unsealed it." Angkor frowned. "You're not listed in the archive manifest." "I wouldn't be. I am the archive." That stopped him cold. "You mean, you work for the governing AI?" They tilted their head, expression unreadable. "No. I mean I am the archive." Their name was Thalen Ray. Or that's what they told him to call them. They didn't ask permission to join him. They simply sat, unrolling a scroll that shimmered with living glyphs and pointed to a symbol that neither of them could translate. Angkor, despite himself, was intrigued. He'd seen that symbol before. On an asteroid etched in bloodvine, floating on the edge of the Muertes Rift. A place forbidden by every charter and haunted by echoes. "You've been there?" he asked. Thalen didn't answer. Instead, they asked, "Do you know what this word means?" Andrew squinted at the scroll. The glyph had no clear pronunciation. But the curvature, the flow, it was intimate. Like the word didn't want to be known by just anyone. "No," he admitted. "But it feels like longing." Thalen smiled. "Close," they whispered. "It means, the ache between souls who've never met, but should have." They returned the next day. And the next. Andrew found himself waiting for them, though he never admitted it. Their presence filled the chamber like music, subtle but impossible to ignore. Thalen knew languages he hadn't studied, told him about civilizations he'd only seen mentioned in forgotten footnotes. They moved with fluid grace, and when they spoke, it was like the words knew where to land. "I thought you said you are the archive," Andrew said one afternoon. "I am." "Then how are you here?" "I wanted to understand something," Thalen replied. "What?" "You." Andrew laughed. It was bitter. "I'm not worth that kind of mystery." "You left Earth to bury yourself in voices no one listens to," Thalen said calmly. "You decipher sorrow for fun. And yet, you still mourn the same name every time you sleep." Andrew froze. "How do you know that?" Thalen didn't answer. But the glyphs on the scroll they held rearranged themselves. Into the letters. Daniel. Andrew's heart stopped. That name hadn't been spoken in 5 years. "Who are you?" he asked, voice cracking. "I am memory," Thalen said. "I am the whisper in language. The first and last archivist. I carry what others leave behind." "So why are you here?" he asked again. Thalen walked toward him. Slowly. Shadows stretched behind them, elongated and reaching. "I am here," they said, softer now, "because you left something in the archive. A piece of yourself. A voice. And you want to return it?" "No," Thalen said. "I want to understand it." Weeks passed. Their time together grew long and quiet. They read ancient poetry aloud. They translated soul songs from the extinct people of the Thren fold. They decoded emotional glyphs written by species who communicated only through shifting sense. One night, Andrew fell asleep on a scroll. When he woke, there was a blanket over him. Not cloth, woven light. Thalen sat beside him, their form steady, calm. "Why are you kind to me?" he whispered. Thalen looked away. "Because you are the first human I've met who listens with his heart." They turned back. "And because I missed you." Andrew flinched. "We only just met." "Not true," Thalen said. And then they touched his forehead. And the room changed. Not visually. Emotionally. Andrew felt it, waves of longing, shadows of time, a sensation like something old stirring beneath stone. Memories that weren't his, but felt like they should be. Then he saw himself, in another time, another place. At a terminal. Typing. Crying. Thalen, beside him. Not quite shaped. Not yet whole. "I watched you mourn," Thalen whispered. "I was born from your silence." Andrew shook. "What are you?" "I'm the echo of every word you've loved too much to forget." He didn't kiss them that night. He couldn't. But he wanted to. The tremor came 3 days later. They were deep in the subchambers, decoding a dead language that could only be understood by touch, etched into living vines that pulsed with stored memory. As Thalen ran their hands across a symbol, the floor beneath them quaked. Andrew stumbled. Reached out. Grasped their wrist. Their skin, if it was skin, burned under his fingers. They turned sharply. "I warned them not to reactivate this chamber," Thalen muttered. "Why?" "Because it houses forbidden memory." The lights shifted. And Andrew felt something else move. Something beneath the archive. They sealed the door. For hours, they worked together, stabilizing the chamber, re-encoding broken seals. It was the closest they'd ever stood. Every time Thalen passed by him, Anger felt static arc through his veins. Finally, exhausted, they sat on the floor beneath a floating manuscript cube. Thalen looked at him. "Your name," they said, "means wind across ancient fields in a dead earth tongue." Anger blinked. "You keep learning me. Because it's the only thing that makes time feel real." They leaned in. He didn't stop them. The kiss was quiet. Hesitant. Like an old song being remembered in pieces. Later, in the dark of a chamber full of forgotten words, they held each other. "Will you leave?" Thalen asked. "I have nowhere else." "You'll leave eventually." "I don't want to." "But you will." "Maybe," Anger said. "But not tonight." Thalen kissed him again. Then whispered. "I missed you." And in the shadows, Anger felt something stretch. A memory. A future. A heartbeat in the floor. The archive trembled. And remembered. The veiled belt had no stars. It was a stretch of cold black hung between systems, a scar carved into the galaxy like something had reached across space and scraped light away. Navigation through it required luck, sacrifice, and maps written in superstition. Ships vanished there. Signals died. Nothing echoed. And it was exactly where Mira Tesh flew when she ran out of reasons to pretend she still cared about living. Her ship, the Tenebrae, once a sleek smuggling vessel turned patchwork coffin, limped across the void, systems failing one by one. Her fuel cells coughed. Her NAV comp looped. And Mira, too tired to curse anymore, watched the stars vanish behind her like old regrets. She hadn't planned to pick up a passenger. She wasn't the saving people type. Not anymore. But when the distress signal pinged her comms, half garbled and flickering, something in her cracked. Just a name. Drave. No rank. No species marker. No coordinates. Just a heartbeat of a voice and the echo of something familiar. Against better judgment, she followed the signal. She found him drifting in an EVA suit, barely intact, his hands clasped around a fractured helm chip. His hair floated in microgravity, dark and shot with silver. He had no pulse, but he breathed, a slow, quiet rhythm that didn't match human lungs. When she brought him aboard, the ship reacted. Lights pulsed differently. Systems that had failed reconnected. Her gravity stabilizer flickered back online with a low hum. Drave didn't wake for another 18 hours. When he did, he stared at her with hollow, black-ringed eyes. "You came," he whispered. Mira frowned. "You were dying." "No," he said. "I was remembering." They spoke little at first. Drave knew things he shouldn't, star paths that no one charted, pressure tolerances on long-dead cruisers, how to fix her leaking plasma duct without tools. His voice was quiet, calm. He never asked questions. He didn't sleep. Not once. "You're not human," she said after a week. He looked at her, unblinking. "No. But you bleed." "Yes." "What are you?" He shrugged. "I was built for direction." "Like a NAVAI?" "No," he said. "I dream of stars I've never seen." "That's not programming." The veiled belt stretched on. No comm signals reached them. The Tenebrae drifted. She patched it. He guided. Together, they slipped between collapsing asteroid fields and lightning-slick gas anomalies that should have vaporized them. Drave always knew which path was safe. Always. "I used to be in the fleet," Mira told him one night, staring out the viewport at the swirling ash of a ruined moon. "I know," he said. She turned to him. "What do you mean, you know?" He didn't answer. Instead, He whispered, I missed you. Her blood ran cold. We've never met. Not like this. She stepped back. You were watching me? No, he said. I was built from the memory of someone who loved you. She didn't believe him. But she didn't make him leave, either. Not when the ship grew colder. Not when nightmares started to fill the corridors with echoes she couldn't explain. Not when her reflection in the glass began moving just slightly out of sync. The Tenebrae was dying. And it was remembering her. She'd lost someone here once, years ago. A co-pilot. A lover. A man named Hal who had laughed like he was burning and touched her like he believed they could escape anything. He died during a blind run through the veiled belt. No body recovered. Just silence. And Drave. He moved like Hal. Stood like him. Touched the NAV panel the same way. She told herself it was coincidence. But one night, she heard Hal's voice on the comms. Not a recording. Not a hallucination. Mira. Her name, spoken in the exact broken tone she remembered. She rushed to the cockpit. Drave stood there. Alone. Staring at the flickering control screen. You heard it, he said. What the hell is happening? I think I am, convergence, he said slowly. A tether made of grief. Her hands curled into fists. That's not an answer. I'm not a person, he said. I am all the endings left behind here. They kissed for the first time in silence. No music. No promises. He kissed like a man who remembered dying. She kissed like a woman who was tired of forgetting. In the following days, they drew closer. They slept side by side, not because they needed warmth, but because the quiet between them didn't hurt as much. When she touched his skin, memories surfaced, hers, not his. Moments she'd buried, Hal's laughter, his smell, the way he'd called her Teshi when he wanted her attention. Drave wasn't Hal. But he carried traces of him. Fragments. Impressions. A soul stitched together from love that had nowhere else to go. You said you were remembering, she whispered once, forehead pressed to his. I think I was made from the ache you left here, he replied. Your pain reached the edges of this place. And something listened. On the 23rd day, they reached the heart of the belt. The glass sea. A vast, shattered expanse of frozen light and crystallized debris. It reflected everything, stars that didn't exist, pasts that hadn't happened, futures that might. He touched the viewport. This is where I woke. I lost him here, she said. He nodded. That's why I began here. She didn't want to say goodbye. But the Tenebrae was giving out. They'd reached the center. There was no more forward. Only down. There's no out from here, she said. There is, he replied. But only if you leave me behind. No. If I stay, he said gently, you'll never return. She shook her head, tears hot in her throat. You're the only thing I've ever come back for. And I was never meant to last, he said. She held him. Desperate. I don't want you to be made of grief. Then remember me in joy. His lips brushed hers. That's how I'll survive. She jettisoned him. Not into space, but into the heart of the sea, where energy coils and memory matter gathered. The Tenebrae used the last of its fuel to escape the belt's pull. She didn't look back. Months later, on a different ship, under a different sky, she stood in a bar on Nissa Colony. The bartender flicked on a holonews feed. A report played, anomalous signal activity detected in the veiled belt. A flare of intelligent code, repeating a single name. Mira. She whispered, I missed you. And across the stars, the ground trembled.